Hey everybody, what's up? This is Brian with GamesUnderPressure.com, and welcome to the first episode of a new series that I'm working on called Too Early. And in this series, I'm going to be taking a look every single week at a Steam Early Access title and just playing through a little bit of it, giving you my impressions, recommendation as to whether you should buy it or not, some things that the developer could maybe add or do differently to make it a better game. And today, for the first episode, I'm going to be taking a look at a game called Distance. Now, Distance is a futuristic racer. The visual style of Distance is interesting. It's a little bit reminiscent of Tron, but it has gameplay that is a little bit similar to F-Zero or Wipeout, maybe not as fast as either of those two games. It actually has a lot in common with a game called Extreme G, which some of you guys might remember from the N64 era. It's been a series that's been long dormant, but it's fast, and there are a few interesting mechanics thrown in there that really separate Distance from the rest of the pack. And primary is jets on the car. So these jets are not positioned on the back of the car like you would normally expect, although there are jets on the back, but there are 4 jets, one in each corner of the car. Now, if you're playing on a controller, which is probably the best way to play this game, you can use the right thumbstick to rotate the car by using those jets. So while you're in the air, you can flip, you can barrel roll, and what the game does is actually throw some obstacles at you, where you, in the air, you need to dodge lasers or other obstacles. Also, you have a jump button, which is kind of cool. And later on in the game, they give you the ability to turn your car into a little bit of an airplane. And when you do that, wings sprout out on the side of the car, and the car handles a little bit like the planes in Diddy Kong Racing, a little bit floaty, but satisfying too. So let's jump into it right now. I'll show you some gameplay. I'll show you 3 different modes: single player, the campaign, multiplayer, and a track editor, and we'll see what you think. So without further ado, let's get into it. As you can see from the title menu here, we have 3 main modes. Adventure is sort of this tutorial-based, thinly veiled narrative, single-player campaign. Arcade gives you the option to play 3 different game types: solo, split screen. You also have your online multiplayer component here. And finally, you have a level editor. So I'm going to start with Adventure, and I'm going to restart the campaign here. And what Distance does very, very well is gradually, as the levels progress, give you more and more to worry about in terms of game mechanics. So when the game first starts out, it is deceptively simple. It feels like just a standard arcadey racer. There are a few mechanics that they give you right off the bat. First is boost, and before I get into the ins and outs of the boost, I want to make it very clear that if you're playing Distance, you should absolutely positively play it on a gamepad. It's best on a gamepad, and as you can see, when they throw more mechanics at you, it gets relatively complicated if you're not playing on a gamepad. So boost is one of the bigger mechanics in the game. By holding down A, you can boost, and the gauge at the back of the car fills. Once it gets red and it fills all the way up, then your car explodes. So you definitely want to manage that carefully throughout. And every time you go through one of these green rings right here, your boost is returned to normal. And the rings in this game are fairly stacked, so you don't have to worry about letting up on the boost when you're just driving for the most part. But the next big mechanic is the ability, using the right thumbstick, to change in the midair direction of your car, and not even necessarily the direction, but just the yaw and pitch. So you can see I just did a barrel roll there, and whatever way you press the right thumbstick, that's the way that your car barrels and pitches through the air. So if you press forward, your car is going to do a front flip. If you press back, your car is going to do a back flip. And side to side, your car will then do barrel rolls in the air. Overall, just if you want to talk about the core driving mechanics of this game, the feel of the car, the handling, it's not perfect at the moment. It seems I don't want to say overly responsive because that sounds like a strange thing to complain about, but it doesn't feel like the car is gripping the road. It doesn't feel like it's actually moving in any kind of realistic fashion. It's just very, very grippy and responsive. I'd like to see maybe some skidding or I don't know, something that just doesn't make it feel so arcadey. But as is, it's all right. It gets the job done, and by adding a few more mechanics, you'll see that the game takes on a completely different form. And another pro of this game is just the obstacles that they throw at you. If you noticed in that last course, there wasn't too much in the way of obstacles on the track. It was pretty easy. Now you can see that they're throwing a few more things at you. There are obstacles in the way, and here is the game's probably the biggest mechanic, the ability to jump. So what this game does, you can jump and then you can boost in the air, and the game takes on a little bit of a vertical sense in that you have to jump to hit some certain shortcuts and certain tracks, and you have to use the jump in conjunction with the boost to get to the end of the level. And what I'm going to do, see, I screwed up there. What I'm going to do is now I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to the next level, because these levels, what they do is they just introduce a new mechanic, and then they allow you to get comfortable with it before the next level where they introduce yet another mechanic or more obstacles or whatever the case is. So if you've seen the beginning of this level, you've sort of seen the end of this level. It doesn't change in any drastic way. Each level is about 2 to 3 minutes long. They get a little bit more lengthy as you progress through. But I'm going to skip ahead now and show you a few later levels, a few later mechanics. So here we are in the third level of the game. And one of my chief complaints with the game is that the levels don't look radically different. And they all have that same sort of pseudo-futuristic style. The colors change a little bit. You can see the overall tone of each level change in color, but overall, I mean, each level looks the same. I'd like to see some more diversity in some of the level design. It all feels sort of samey. If you ask me what level I was in right now, I don't know if I'd necessarily be able to tell you. So I'd like to see a little bit more diversity there. Now you can see that distance is starting to throw some more obstacles at us, and the more unique obstacles. They add saws, they add these little walls that you have to jump over, they add these little grindy obstacles, like right here, if you hit, you'll die. And the game does a fairly good job of amping up the chaos very gradually. So they'll introduce a new mechanic and then introduce some more obstacles, and then they'll introduce another mechanic, more obstacles. And if you notice here, however, the overall layout of the courses, it's sort of a one-trick pony in some ways. You know, these tracks split. And here, check this out. This is kind of a cool mechanic. If you hit one of these obstacles, it'll cut the car in half or ruin the car in a number of different ways. And then you have to wait till you get a ring like that for the car to be regenerated. So if the saw cuts off a corner of your car, let's see if I can do it, you'll have difficulty cornering in that area. So it's sort of cool. As you can see, I just used the right thumbstick there. And that comes in handy, in a very big way in the future. So I'm going to skip ahead now to a later level and show you sort of the confluence of mechanics that add to the game's overall style. So this is the fourth level right here, and the reason I'm showing you guys this is because it introduces one of the biggest mechanics in the game, aside from the boosting and the jump, and that is the ability to turn your car into a plane by pressing the X button whenever you're in the air. The cool thing about this is there's not really too many limitations on when you can do this. The only limitation is you have to be in the air to trigger the wings. So as you can see, if you even want to just jump into the air, you can do that. And what's really cool about this is it opens some of the levels up to more shortcuts that you can discover just by playing around with these mechanics. And this, in my opinion, is sort of where the game takes off, no pun intended. It's where the game sort of opens up. And after this is the last main mechanic that they introduce. What they do is now they start amping up the chaos. They start throwing more and more and more obstacles at you. And the game gets kind of cool. In terms of control, it's a little bit wonky. It feels very floaty, and I'm sure that's probably how it should, but it feels a little bit like the plane parts in Diddy Kong Racing on the N64. A little floaty, but satisfactory overall. So this is the final level of the game. So there are only 5 or 6 levels, I believe, and you can get to the final level in about 15 minutes. I think I'm at about 13 minutes and 50 seconds right now. So don't go in expecting a huge single player experience, a highly replayable experience, except if you're looking at online multiplayer. It's a very, very short single player. It takes a little bit of a different approach in that there aren't, multiple versions of each track. You're not racing against anybody. It's sort of, you're just racing against the course. So you don't get, you don't have cups. You don't have organization like that. It's fairly simple. You're just racing against the obstacles. And you can see that there are some interesting visual effects going on here. This ties into the game's story a little bit. As you can see, it's got sort of this haunted housey kind of vibe. The sound effects are pretty cool. And again, this goes into that narrative, which is a little bit confusing, but it's sort of cool nonetheless. And this is a level that has a lot of standout personality, and I hope that the personality in this level comes through in the rest of the game, so you're not just going through this samey looking Tron landscape over and over and over. This shows that the developer can add a little bit of personality, and hopefully that comes through. I don't know. So now let's take a look at the online component of this game. And right off the bat, if I have to say one thing that's disappointing about this, is there aren't a lot of people playing with it. So you can host your own game, you can join other people's games, but getting into a game is a little bit tougher than it should be. Again, it's hard to criticize the game for because it is in early access. There aren't a whole heck of a lot of people playing it, but it's something that you should know going into it. So let's see if I can attempt to join this one. And sometimes the connections are hit or miss, so you might be able to get in pretty easily. See, and here I'm missing the level that they're playing, so that's a no-go for me right there. Let's see if there's anybody else. No, they're public, so I'm going to have to host a game on my own. Yep, start the server. Let's see if there's a level here that I can try. I'll try this. Ready up and start the game. And I'll be all on my own here, but other people should hopefully join. A lot of these are levels that are similar in look and feel to the single-player levels. They might even be the same. It's hard to tell, at least some of them. Online performance, I have to say, has been pretty good. And you have all of the aspects of the game, whether it's the boost, the flying, the ability to jump your car. You have all of that available right from the start. So starting with the adventure mode, which acts as sort of a tutorial, is recommended, because if you just jump right into online multiplayer, you'll be at a disadvantage. But yeah, I mean, like, this is basically it. So imagine this with some other people. It gets a little hectic. but it's, it's fun. It adds a little bit of replayability to it. It's not an experience that I crave. It's not something that I find myself wishing to play, and I can't quite put my finger on why that is. Maybe it's because, just in terms of the scope of content in this game, it's very early, so there's not a whole heck of a lot of versatility here. It's sort of the same feel, the same style course over and over and over, and just with other racers. So this is another mode in the online multiplayer mode, and this is a stunt mode, which is interesting. I don't know how fully fleshed out this is, just because there aren't really a lot of tricks that you can do. I mean, you can do some barrel rolls, you can do some flips, but in terms of ranking and scoring some of those, there's not a whole heck of a lot to it. But it's a very cool addition, and I'm happy to see them doing some of this. A lot of this reminds me of Next Car Game from Bugbear. It's a virtual playground to just sort of dick around on and screw around with. Again, is there a whole heck of a lot of replayability here? I don't think there is, unfortunately. But, it's another option. So the third piece of the distance puzzle here is the level editor. And I gotta say, it's remarkably full-featured. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the tool that the developer was using to build a lot of those levels. And it's fairly complicated too, so this is not something that you can just jump into on a whim and throw some things together and have a working system here. So I really don't know what I'm doing here, but I'll just sort of screw around and add some stuff. You can see they have full buildings that you can add as you're making your track. You can zoom out and sort of get an eagle-eye view of everything. You can go back here. You can add roads, lighting to the roads, rings, ramps, things like that. So you can get fairly specific with your course design. It's a very full-featured tool set. You can add lighting sources, glass pieces here, broken pieces, tunnels, a whole heck of a lot of stuff. So overall, I think it's pretty cool, being able to add obstacles like the buzz saws. It's cool. It's something that I'm probably not going to play around with a lot because it is so complicated. I don't know if the game has grabbed me enough to want to create my own courses. However, there are a few hundred, I think 330 some, as of the taping of this episode. So there are a lot of community created maps out there, and I think even if you don't want to create your own, just having this level editor in here and being able to play some of the other maps that are being created out in the community, that's a really cool thing. So overall, it's a nice mode. It's not something that I really care about, but I'm anxious to see what other people are going to create, and they've created some pretty cool stuff already. So at the end of the day, Distance is a good game. It's not yet a great game, although I think it has the potential to be one. Right now, this game is about 6 to 12 months away from a full retail release. So you can't expect it to be as fully featured as a lot of the competition on the market. And being a Steam Early Access game, you know that they're going to keep adding to it, in that what you're getting is a little bit less than what you'd normally expect. That just goes hand in hand with Steam Early Access. So should you jump in right now? If you're desperate for a racer, yes. It's $20. I don't feel like the value proposition is really something to get excited about, but it'll give you at least some enjoyment, a few hours of enjoyment. and you'll be able to follow this game along throughout its development. If you're not a diehard fan of racers, in particular futuristic racers, I would say hold off. I do think the game will be good eventually, and it'll be fully featured eventually. But right now, it's a little bit tough to recommend. So if you're a fan of racers, definitely. A fan of futuristic racers, absolutely. But if not, just hold off. It's going to be a great game, but right now it's missing some really key things. So please rate and subscribe if you like these videos. And if you have any recommendations of Steam Early Access games to try, please leave those below, and I'll see how much I can get to. Next week, I'm going to be taking a look at a interesting looking 2D platformer called The Deer God, and you got to see this. It's got a really cool visual style to it. So be sure to subscribe and come back for that. And thanks for watching.